Hi, everyone. Ed Bixby here from the Global Green Burial Alliance, and this is Spotlight Now. Today, I'm with Michelle Puga, who lives in Cuenca, Ecuador, where she leads Death Talk Cuenca, a community-based initiative that creates a space for meaningful conversations around death, dying, and grief. Deeply connected with both the local and expat communities, Michelle helps people navigate these tender topics while living far from home. Michelle's also a co-founder of Latin American Network for Accompaniment in Dying and Grief, a collaborative platform that unites professionals and practitioners across the region to share knowledge, experiences, and mutual support. Together, they work toward a culturally rooted, health-centered approach to end-of-life death care and bereavement, one that honors the depth, diversity, and sacredness of Latin American traditions. Her work is part of a broader calling to rehumanize death and accompany individuals and communities throughout one of life's most profound transitions. So, welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks for the lovely introduction.
It was my pleasure. So, why don't we get started by learning a little bit more about how you got involved in the death care industry?
Okay, well, that's an interesting question. I feel like I've always been involved in family matters, and I've always had this ease in me to handle any of the deaths that happens in my family. And when I was back in, I think it's 3 years ago, we have the first encounter of the Latin American network here in Ecuador, in Quito. One of my friends, Sofia Plonsky, she was the one who was organizing this. And it's a fun thing because she was my former boss in the tourist industry where we both were working before in a different life. And she moved away from everything, and she said, like, I'm going to become a death doula. And I was like, a what? And that's something very foreign for Ecuador. So she actually is one of the, I think it's the first doula in Ecuador, to be honest. And she started this movement. She got connected with other girls in other parts of South America and Central America, and they decided to do this first encounter. And since we get along so well, and she knows how I am, she said, like, Michelle, you should come here and spend this weekend with us. I think you're gonna like it. I was like, what is it about? And it's like, just come. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna go. I'm Team Sophie. I'm gonna follow. And I went there, and there was people coming from Colombia, from Chile, from Mexico. We spent an entire weekend talking about death, and I'd never felt more alive in my life. And for me, that marks a before and after in my life. And I was like, I want to do this. I want people to feel this because it's such a powerful energy what death brings us when we just put it on the table. So that's how I said, like, you know what, Sophie, I want to be part of this movement. I want to help grow in it. How can I help? We start just trying to, gather more people. And I saw that one of the first needs that is very feasible here in Ecuador and in Latin America is education. So I start, like, Googling everything about how to open spaces for people. And I think some of my mates mentioned death cafes. And I was like, what is a death cafe? So I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. And in Cuenca, where I live, I have a very big community of expats who love Cuenca. It's one of the first destinations for retirees around the world. And I'm very connected with the expat community because my husband is from Australia. And we were like, you know what? I'm gonna open one in English and one in Spanish and see what happens. So I started doing these dead cafes. I thought never, like, I didn't know how many people are gonna show up, but you know what? I had like 20 people in Spanish, 25 people in English the first time. Wilka Roy from Mexico came to support me. Sophie and Vero from Quito also came here, and it became awesome. So I said, like, I'm gonna do this every month. So ever since, I haven't stopped. I just stopped last month in October because I gave birth to my last baby girl. But I've been pretty active in the community, and I feel the need, like we need to educate people before everything else. I have huge projects in my head. I want to do green burials here. And I remember I contacted you, I think a year ago, saying like, what's your experience on green burials? I'm so energized. I want to do this. So I do feel like first I need to educate my community and get them connected again with death. So whenever these projects are live, they can really engage with them, and it's going to be more powerful.
Well, absolutely. And, Michelle, you're absolutely right. It all starts with the education, because when you lift that mystery of no one initially wants to talk about death, even your experience, but then when you do, you find yourself not only intrigued, but not fearful to speak of it. And actually, it makes you feel better. So, I mean, what Death Talk Cuenca has done, I commend you for it. I think it's a wonderful thing, and I know you're helping people.
Thank you.
And what is considered the standard funeral practice now in Ecuador and Latin America as a whole? What would the viewer, to understand better, what is typically being done at the moment?
So right now, in general, is not too many options. So if you're talking about, let's say, the communities in the cities, it's a very traditional way of doing things. You have your cassette, you have the funeral home, and you go there, and then you have the cemeteries full of concrete, and you have your spot, and then you put it there. So it's very, very traditional. But last year in Mexico, we were able to have the first green burial, and we were so happy. We were in the second encounter of the network that we're in, and it was so thrilled. Even Gretchen from your team, she was there to support us, and it was amazing. We had a gathering in the cemetery. We talk about green burials and how they can change everything here, how we can be more connected to Mother Earth, how this is just so important. And I think it was a great first step for a Latin America's movement. And it planted a lot of seeds that I'm pretty sure they are going to be seen in the years after. So yes, we are, I think, still in diapers on that, but in a good path.
Absolutely. And you got to crawl before you walk. And it sounds like you guys are, we were crawling about 20 years ago here in the United States. But what I found really interesting was, and this is really nice to know for your organization, is that we were up and walking rather quickly. And,
Mhm.
and it doesn't take much longer to get running. It's really about having people experience it. So that experience you had in Mexico, that will transcend. That's what needs to happen, so people understand, exactly what the benefits are. And so at the moment, then, is there anything available as far as eco-friendly funeral options in your country? Or maybe I could rephrase that. If you were to ask for it, would it be well received, or would it be something at the moment that they might look at and say that they wouldn't do? Or how are you finding, are those conversations happening, I guess is what I should say.
I think they've been happening, but not powerfully. Like we haven't gone yet to the government to say, like, we want to do this project, or what we've done is like trying to give some more eco-friendly options, like for ashes. That we have like the green burials that are very eco-friendly, and then we have the water ones, the ones that can transform into a plant. But for example, knocking doors into the cemeteries houses and trying to tell them how it can be, adapt into their thinking, it's more like, I think, business situation. They don't want to miss business. They have all this whole structure and this monopoly that we want to just break apart. And I feel like sometimes it feels like a giant beast, but it's actually not. And I remember that you told me that. It's like, don't be afraid of going and just doing it, because you're going to get surprised on how fast and how open the people. And we had this actually last year, because in Ecuador made a huge step that we never thought is going to happen, is that we make the euthanasia legal in Ecuador. It's the second country. The first one was Colombia. And this was a surprise for everybody. I remember talking with my friend Sophie and Vero, and we were like, okay, this is happening. We were in the process, and we were like, okay, probably it's going to happen or no. We were not really sure, but it was really fast. They approved it, and we were like, wow. So after that, I was like, okay, I think everything is possible. And that has opened a very big door for Ecuador into really looking into details. We're looking into palliative care and how the rights has to be applied. End of life planning too comes into the table, and green boreals too. So I feel like I cannot say it's going to be fast or not. I don't want to say it. I don't want to jinx it, but I think we're in a good path.
No, absolutely. And what's nice to hear is that it's the entire picture that everyone's looking at. All of those integral parts that lead back to that final decision, that final conversation. But to have that while you're living, that's what's most important. So I think that is a wonderful thing that people can be involved in that. And I would imagine that the education with the provider or with the funeral industry itself is probably critical too. What's funny is you're absolutely right when it comes to business, because this is a business, for these individuals. They need to truly understand the benefits of what we're offering, with natural burial. And not only are there benefits to the families and the environment, but there's benefits to their business model. They just need to understand how to present and how to offer these services. So I think that's key too to the conversation. As they start to understand these things, I think it won't be as hard as you think. So or not, I know you don't think it's hard, but
this happens in the community. So if you go to the jungle where there's communities that are a little bit isolated, they are not going to wait for a community funeral and going into a cemetery. No, they take their deaths in their hands and they do what they need to do. So if that's kind of the way that I'm trying to go, it's like protected traditions. This is already happening. This is not something that it's new or something. It's just trying to come back to what we were doing before.
Absolutely. Good point. Yeah, what we've always done. So no, it really sounds exciting. And, of course, I know of what you've been doing in Wilca, and there's a lot of wonderful things happening right now. And I think that that's great. And as far as Death Talk Cuenca is concerned, do you offer anything outside of the Death Talks as far as educational programs, or is that something you see yourself working on in the future? How does that play into it?
Well, I've been trying to look what my community needs the most. And for example, for the expats community, I think I have like 80% Americans coming here. The other ones are Canadians and other parts of Europe. The thing is, like, they come in this very in love mentality of Cuenca and saying, like, I'm going to retire here. This is the best place in the world. Everything is cheap. I feel like king here and everything. But it's not until some of them get sick that they really are clicking to, I might die here. Where am I? What are the rules here? What I can do here? What are my rights? So what I'm doing is also working with some law firms. One of them is Expat Law Group, which is really good for them to understand, what can I do a will here? Is this going to be valid in US or not? How what my assets that I have here, can my family from US can do something about it? So all these little nuances that people really doesn't know about, I'm trying to fill it in and more being like a connector with providers. I also saw that there's this need of having nurses that speaks English, and that's something really hard that I'm trying to put, because in a very sensitive moment of your life when you are transitioning dead, or a family of yours is dying, and you don't know the language where you are, and trying to talk to the medical team and trying to communicate what are your needs, and you can't, it's heartbreaking. So I'm trying to feel these little things and connect people with doctors that speak English, nurses that can be very human, lawyers that can help out with all the little details and paperwork. So that's what I've been doing in the community with the expats. And for Ecuadorians, I'm focusing in education. I feel like that's the main thing to do with them. It's because I feel like a little bit of, I wouldn't say rejection, but it's like whenever I talk about that, it's like, oh, don't talk about Bruno. It's like, no. And but every time that I start talking to the people, they are little by little opening up. And the other angle that I'm doing that I'm a little bit excited and I'm starting still in like planning process. I have 4 kids, and with my kids, I talk about that all the time and talk about how I want to become an avocado tree. And this is very normal for us to talk about these things. And I feel like that's the key to for the next generations is just connect them, like don't let them disconnect from the nature of dying. So I want to start offering some speeches or some talks or maybe workshops in the schools here in Cuenca, the ones that open the doors for me, and start talking to kids about these things in a very, lovely way and trying more for them to express how they feel about this because I feel like there's a lot of wisdom in them that we could potentially use in our adults.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, Michelle, I love everything I'm hearing. You have great vision and you really are checking all the boxes because, you know, helping the families with the legal aspects, helping your fellow countrymen not feel like it's a taboo subject. And then, you're 100% right. It starts with the children to change in the future because if they're not afraid or if they realize or believe that these things are right, that's what's most important. That's how we'll institute and change the future. So I must tell you, wonderful work. You've got great vision. And with that being said, this always comes to the fun part for me anyway of our conversation. So ultimately, what would your vision or hope for death care be in Ecuador and Latin America as a whole in the future? Let's say, 5 or 10 years from now, what would you like to see, with the good work that you're doing?
Oh boy, this is an interesting question. So in the Latin American network, our vision that we're having for Latin America is to come back to our traditions, the traditions that are around death that are so powerful, protect them and share them, because I feel like that's the way that it's going to open up the path toward the governmental entities and everybody to accepting some processes like green burials or funerals at home or like end of life planning, way much more open. So we are really focusing in educating, open doors, and showing people that they are not alone. Everybody has questions about that. Everybody has a lot of like fears about it, but when you put it on the table, it all this weight is just bearable. So my vision is to have really good centers in Latin America that can support these movements. And I do feel like we're growing fast, especially with the network that we are creating. The last encounter that we had it in Chile, and it was a blast. We had so much richness for every country that assisted. It was like something that we're experiencing every time is different, every time is more richer, and every time the people we feel that they are more engaged, and we're really liking that.
Absolutely, and that's a wonderful vision, and there's no doubt in my mind that it'll come true. And you know what's interesting, and I may have mentioned this to you, and I probably have said it to Wilka in the past. You know, I believe that Latin America, uh, on a whole, really, you have a bit of a leg up, believe it or not, when it comes to like you had mentioned, people are already doing this. Even though maybe not everyone is, it's still part of the culture. It's still part of the DNA, and I think it'll change rapidly, and it is. And I think you guys will be leading the way, in which is wonderful. because there's some other parts of the country, or not the country, but the world, I should say, that need to take a page out of this book and look a little bit back at their past. So I'll tell you, Michelle, you guys are doing wonderful work. I want to thank you for joining us today. Viewers can learn more about visiting deathtalkcuenca.com. If there's anything that we can do here at the Global Green Burial Alliance to support you, please always reach out. You know, we'd love to be able to be there for you. And also share anything that you're doing, you know, so we can share it to the community. And I think you and I had mentioned too, in the future, maybe there could be a collaboration to where we could do some of these things, you know, in Spanish, you know, so that collaborating, you know, I think a Global Green Burial Alliance Latin America sounds like it could be in the works someday. That would be a wonderful thing. So
be amazing.
Yeah, I think it would be great. So thank you, Michelle. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Ed, for opening up this space too.
No, you're very welcome. So everybody, see you at the next Spotlight.